Back from a quick break. We're going to go to item 410, emergency management, requested changes to the Flow Store fire protection contract. Steve, are you going to start, or Jonathan?
I think I'm actually going to start. You know Steve Langer, our fire marshal, and Bobby Smith, who's our emergency management director, but this is Ken Nichols, who is the president of the Flow Store Volunteer Fire Department Board of Directors. Steve and I went down and met with the board of directors about some questions they have on the contract we instituted this year. Unfortunately, we weren't able to completely resolve. We resolved some of those. We had a good discussion, and we continued to have discussions. But they still had some concerns about the contract that Mr. Nichols wanted to address. And I'll let Bobby and Steve provide any other introduction they would like.
Yes, so, and the change that they are requesting for the contract.
Okay, and just to make sure that we're with you, is that item number 10 in the contract that's redlined on?
Yes, ma'am.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioners, that's page 82. If you want to turn to page 82 in your packet, and that way we will be at the right place. Thank you very much for being here.
Oh, you're certainly welcome. I appreciate your time and the privilege of being here tonight to speak with you about the Tax District Fire Service contract. As you all know, the Tax District Fire Service contract is a contract, and I'll just generally call it contract because it's kind of hard to say, Tax District Fire Service contract. So generally speaking, the contract is a contract between the county and the volunteer fire departments detailing the fire protection and life safety services that the volunteer fire departments agree to provide to the residents of the local fire tax district, okay? These services are provided by volunteer members of the fire departments, dedicated professionals who contribute thousands of hours collectively of their own time to provide fire protection and life safety services to the rural county residents. These volunteer fire departments and the dozens of volunteers not only provide fire protection and life safety services to their own local community, they also assist other fire departments in providing those services to their communities as well. So it's not just for the one individual fire department, as you probably already know. Flow Store is one of the volunteer fire departments in the county. I don't know how many there are, but I know there are several. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We were founded in 1962, 51 years ago, by local Flow Store community leaders. The citizens of the Flow Store community got together and financed the startup of the fire department through loans and community donations. It was built by citizens of the community, donating their time and their money towards that effort. Money to purchase the land, construct the building, and purchase the needed equipment. Time to staff the department and being available in the middle of the night when a fire broke out. Throughout the history of the Flow Store Volunteer Fire Department, and I think the same story is probably true of most of the other volunteer fire departments as well, our expenses have been paid by money collected through the Tax District Fire Service tax, through contributions, bake sales, barbecues, and other types of fundraiser activities. We have a lot of volunteers, not just firemen, but the Ladies Auxiliary and many other people that help us keep the fire department ongoing. Flow Store Fire Department is and always has been very conservative in making any purchasing decisions. Just look at our building or our apparatus. Nothing is elaborate, but we have the right equipment to provide the best fire protection and life safety services that we can. We are definitely conservative on our spending, okay? Tonight I'd like to talk to you about changes that were recently made to the contract, and changes that we believe that need to be made to the contract, specifically paragraph 10. We had talked to the assistant county manager and Mike, as well, about paragraph 9, and there's a very minor change there, as you can see. The attorney redlined, and as you can read there, in that last sentence, it says, "The departments will make the decision on distribution of the equipment." So the only thing we're asking is the word "the" be inserted and department be capitalized, okay? We're in full agreement that should we ever go out of business, the equipment that we own is the property of the local community, and in the event we were to ever go out of business, that equipment would all be turned over to the local community to continue to provide fire service protection for that community, okay? Before focusing too much on paragraph 10, I'd like to read the purpose of the tax district fire service contract, in case you're not that familiar with it. It's very brief and taken literally from the contract. It states, "The purpose of this contract is for the department to provide fire protection and other life services to the residents within the rural fire protection tax district, and for the county to fund these services with the tax collected from that district, within that district for that purpose, pursuant to provisions of North Carolina general statutes," and I won't read those statute numbers. The tax district fire service contract is a contract. It's a fire service contract between the county and the volunteer fire departments. This year's contract had several changes. Again, we've already addressed paragraph 9, but we're asking the county commissioners to review paragraph 10 and agree with us in making the changes as indicated on the display there. We have always been very careful and very conservative in making any business decisions to purchase equipment. We discussed these decisions at length, we ask for competitive bids, and we try to spend our money wisely. We also take good care of our equipment so it will provide many years of reliable service. While we respect the leadership of the Fire Marshal's Office, Steve and Bobby, we have a lot of respect for their office and their intentions. We're concerned that the Fire Marshal's Office is attempting to invoke authority over the volunteer fire department's purchasing decisions, authority over a 501c3 nonprofit organization that has contracted with the county to provide these fire services, okay? That's the gist of our concern. We're asking that paragraph 10 be changed as indicated in the marked up copy to allow the volunteer fire departments and the county fire marshal's office to continue to work as business partners in providing volunteer fire protection and life safety services to the residents in the rural part of the county, while still allowing the volunteer fire departments, who again are 501c3 corporations, to make their own business decisions in purchasing the appropriate fire apparatus and safety equipment. Flow Store is in full agreement to consult with the Fire Marshal's Office on all fire apparatus and life safety equipment purchases. Prior to any purchase, we respect their input and opinion, and we fully agree and support their effort to create joint purchasing agreements to help reduce the cost of equipment and supplies. However, we feel that the final purchase decision should remain the responsibility of the volunteer fire department. So with that, I'm asking for fair treatment from the county and respect for our business decisions. Allow us to work as business partners, but allow us to make the final decision, and don't try to take control of those decisions away from us. We are a nonprofit organization. We're partners in providing fire protection and life safety services to our rural citizens. The volunteer fire departments struggle to attract volunteers to continue to provide all of the hundreds of hours that they do provide in offering this service to the county. it saves the county millions of dollars every year because we have these volunteer fire departments, okay? So I'm only asking that you review paragraph 10 and please give your approval to making the indicated changes. I thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I don't know who would answer better. How many fire districts do we have?
There are 10 in-county departments, 2 out-of-county districts. So we have 12 volunteer fire districts.
Let me rephrase. How many do we have contracts with?
Well, Lord, we
Is it
have,
12?
let's see, 12, we have contracts, 15, because that includes the cities as well.
Okay, well, okay.
If you go back and take the municipalities out.
Trying to get to this contract with.
Okay.
Where, and what I'm going to is that we set a fire district tax rate. So who do we have this how many do we have this contract with?
12.
12, okay. And at this point, how many have signed the contract? I mean, how many do we have contracts in place with?
Everyone but the exception of
Okay.
Flow Store.
Okay. Jason, I know you've been reading a whole lot. And we had a fire study done. Have you had that presented to you?
I have not.
Okay. So that would be something, we do want to make sure that he gets the fire study report that we had so that he can kind of better understand this. I've had to learn a whole lot about fire districts, living in the city limits and not having to personally deal with it. And I just want to kind of make sure I understand things, and then everybody will have a chance. From the fire study, one of the problems that we had previously was different equipment all over the place.
Yeah,
And so one of the things, if I remember correctly from the fire study, we were trying to get similar equipment so that if this district and this district and this district they all get pulled in to help each other out, that they have compatible equipment. Is that right?
Yeah, the fire study made a lot of recommendations, and one of those recommendations was to update our contracts and provide some accountability and performance measures within the contract. And that's kind of what we've done. We feel the contract that we have is kind of the middle of the road contract compared to a lot of other counties. The fire study recommended that, we look at equipment being purchased by all departments. It viewed our departments as being, while they all are providing the same service, they're operating independently, and to look at ways to do joint purchasing, save money, standardize equipment, and a part of that, is looking at standardization of apparatus. We've had some examples in the county, unfortunately. I think some of that coming into play with the study of where, we've got departments that have replaced equipment when really not needed to be replaced. It still had a life left per NFPA standards. We've had equipment that's been purchased that was more designed and made for urban areas versus rural, and then those departments then realizing that it doesn't suit their district have turned around and had to sell equipment. And so just, the whole purpose of Section 10 is just to look at creating a layer of accountability for all parties involved.
Okay. I have a couple. As I understand it, the role of the county as far as volunteer fire departments, and tell me if I'm wrong, one, we have to contract with somebody or we have to provide it, right? So that is our role, is to determine who to contract with. And we set the tax rate for each of those districts based on input from them. But I know that in years past, we have greatly struggled at tax increases in fire districts when those have been presented to us. Sometimes we've gone along with them and sometimes we haven't. So is there any other thing the county's charged with as far as the fire districts?
The county has a responsibility providing the service. Again, you choose how you provide that through contracts or your own department. And you do set the tax rate. The county also provides funding for staffing to each department, $30,000 a year. And they also receive sales tax And I don't know how that formula is. I'll have to defer to Ms. Dubois because I still don't understand how that is done, but I know each department receives a portion of the sales tax.
They receive sales tax because we get our sales tax distributed on the ad valorem method, and that's a requirement by statute. That if you go on the ad valorem method versus population, that you have to distribute to all taxing districts through the county. So it's split based on their tax valuation compared to our tax valuation, and then sales tax is distributed that way.
And as Steve was talking about, the fire study came back and said one of our biggest problems is that we didn't have a one-team approach as providing fire service, that we had 12 individual teams out there. So some of the recommendations and some of the conversations we've had with management is how do we start heading towards that one-team approach. And again, the recommendation was to put some accountability, some assurances and performance standards in the contract. And this Section 10, again, was to make sure that the fire marshal's office is engaged in those conversations, that purchases aren't just being made without due diligence. Unfortunately, some have not. They've paid $600,000 for a piece of apparatus that another department paid $380,000 for. So, you know, that's funding that could have been used to purchase other equipment, to staff more people during the needed hours. So again, the whole purpose of this Section 10 was to, again, add that additional layer of accountability to make sure that we're working together towards that one-team approach, and that the decisions that our contractor, I hate to break it down, but Mr. Nichols is very correct in that our volunteers are very essential to us, and they provide us a great service. But it is a contract relationship, and we needed to have some more assurances countywide that those tax dollars were being spent correctly, that we weren't purchasing Lexuses when, you know, a Ford or Chevy would suffice. And so that, again, was the whole intent of Section 10.
Okay, I just wanted, because I want to make sure, Jason, being new, I want to make sure you get some idea. You live in the city limits too, so you probably have not had as much experience with volunteer fire departments, so I was trying to make sure you had some.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Anybody want to start with questions? Chris, do you want to start? Okay. Steve? Larry?
You said the other 10 other departments have already signed this agreement?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, 11.
Did they read it before they signed it?
Yes, sir. We, they all read it before they signed it, and we actually went out to a couple of them's board meetings, because there were a couple of departments that had some questions on some other sections, and Mr. Marshall attended those meetings with us. I think Mr. Downs went to us with one, but we answered all their questions I'm assuming that they were okay because they all did execute the contract.
What would it hurt to put this in this one agreement with them and let them make their own decisions, but they're still going to come to y'all to tell you what they're doing, correct?
Yeah, I believe their change there is that they would consult with us. From our standpoint is we put out one contract with all the departments. So, you know, if there was a change for this individual department, somebody above us would need to authorize that.
For all of them.
Change it for all of them.
Or change it for all of them, yes, sir.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It looks to me like the fire department would know more about what they need.
So one of the things I wanted to point out, there was a concern that if they hadn't, with them not signing it, that there would not be a contract. And we were able to confirm that the contract they signed last year continues in force until it's replaced. So we're good in terms of being under a contract. And the fire marshal's office has offered that, and I believe you've already started putting that together, a group that can begin to review to make changes for next year. And we did send this out and actually have some comments back before we sent out a final draft. So we had sent it out to departments, had some comments, made changes, and then sent it back out for their signature and approval. But they've already committed that we'll continue to be an iterative process. We'll go back out again this year and look and see to make sure it's accomplishing the goals of both the fire study and what the commissioners have expressed. And the other place I think this one comes from, and we've expressed this to Flow Store, is that, you know, we've heard the questions this board has asked during the budget time and are trying to relate some of that back to them. That's a question, particularly if there is a tax increase proposed, where the commission has asked, about what, the use of that tax increase and about the specific equipment and in this case apparatus possibly that it's being used for. So we're trying to reflect that in the contract, what you've been looking for.
I'd like to add, though, that we're We have no problem, and we're in full agreement in consulting with the fire marshal's office in any purchase decision that we make. It's rare that we actually purchase equipment. We have no problem in discussing it, considering their input and recommendations, and them assisting us in saving money in any way that we can save money. But ultimately, it is a fire service contract. It's a contract between the county and the department, whereas we agree that we will provide the service, and the county agrees that the tax money will come to us to help fund that service. I don't know that if you were signing a contract to provide taxi service or medical service or anything else like that in the county, that you would normally dictate to that company what kind of equipment they were going to have to buy to provide that service. The contract is just to provide the service, not to get down to the details of telling them what kind of equipment they must purchase or not purchase. Although, again, I want to restate, we are all for consulting with the fire marshal's office before purchasing an equipment and even justifying it. But ultimately, the decision needs to rest with the fire department. And although the other volunteer fire departments did sign and return their contract, in conversations with those other fire departments, they did so reluctantly. A lot of them have the same concerns that we do, in that this is a fire service contract, and we do not feel that the county needs to be dictating whether or not we can provide, or rather purchase, a particular piece of equipment. We're not a department that is going to spend money frivolously on equipment. We're very, very conservative and very sound in any decisions that we make.
And if
I
could-
guess just to add to that, again, this is just to provide some consistency throughout the service. It's to set up a dialogue, or actually to require that dialogue up front before the purchases are made. And hopefully after those conversations are made, then they would go together, the fire marshal's office and the departments would go together and come to you when it comes budget time and it's time for you to approve a tax increase. Remember, these vehicles and these pieces of apparatus, they start around 100,000 and they go to 700,000 or 800,000. So these are not just minor purchases. And so that's why, that's the only thing. We're not telling them what they need. We do want to be part of the conversation so that when it does come to you as a board and they've made a purchase in mid-year that's going to require you to raise their taxes at budget time just to pay for it. So that's the only thing. And again, even so now or in the past, or even if it comes to you without this contract in place, say we change the language. If it comes to you, our guys are going to still evaluate that purchase, and they're going to come to you, and if they don't agree with it, it's going to be a negative recommendation, and then what are you going to do as far as a tax rate? You're sort of bound one way or the other, or if you don't fund the tax rate of that increase, then they're going to be required to either do a lot more in-house fundraising, or they're going to have to default. So, again, we're not trying to be any overbearing. Again, hopefully, our fire marshal's office is considered a partner with all these departments, and I think they are. It's just our concern. And again, with any, and I would say, I guess, Mr. Nichols, we do, when we do contract with some vendors, we do ask them what equipment they're using. But also, there are some that we contract with that we don't buy their equipment. And that's going to be the problem. I understand you guys are 501(c)(3)s, and again, none of this is to take away what the value you guys offer and the wonderful service that volunteer firemen do. We all understand that, and we are all thankful for it. This is just to provide some consistency throughout the system. We understand that you're 12 individual 501(c)(3)s, but we also understand that you're crossing jurisdictional lines for mutual aid. So we want to make sure from a consistency standpoint that the equipment's somewhat consistent, but the biggest thing is going to be the cost. The cost is the biggest thing, and that cost is not something that you guys, when you buy a $700,000 vehicle or $500 or $300, that you're paying for that solely with what you're doing in-house funding. You're required, or you're you're depending on that tax rate. And that's a big decision for our board to have to make every year, is on that tax increase. Again, this is not to be overbearing. It's really just to spark that dialogue so that we're involved from the beginning. And that's all this is.
We have no problem with the dialogue. The only thing we're asking is that the words must, that we must have permission from the fire marshal's office before purchasing that equipment. It can be worded differently than what is on the board, to where we are a partner in the decision. And we are all for consulting and listening to the advice. And as far as buying similar equipment to kind of standardize it across the entire county, we're all for that as well. But we really do believe the ultimate decision should rest with the fire department, because the fire department is responsible for the loan on that equipment, not the county. The fire department signs the paper, and we're responsible for the loan. And I can only speak for Flow Store District, but our tax rate is amongst the lowest out there. We did not ask for an increase last year. We asked for a revenue neutral increase, and the only reason we did that was because of the unexpected expense with the new communications equipment. Outside of that, we had already voted as a board that we would not ask for any kind of tax increase. So we are doing our due diligence and working hard to keep the cost down, and I believe the ultimate buying decision, though, should rest with the individual fire department after they have went through the consulting exercise with the fire marshal's office.
If I could address one point, I would differ that most departments went into this reluctantly. We had several departments that actually said, well, this is a good start, but we actually would like to see some more stricter requirements and some more performance measures, depending on who you talk to. We've received complaints from various fire department members, from citizens, questioning purchases and things of that nature. So again, we tried to find a happy medium where there was just another level of accountability. Again, I don't see anything in this contract that hurts a taxpayer. All it is putting another layer of, we've done due diligence, we've checked this out, this is a valid purchase, this is a needed purchase, we are heading in the right direction. I don't see it hurting a taxpayer in any way, shape, or form.
The contract is just to provide some consistency throughout the system. That's all. We're not targeting. It was not meant to target Flow Store or Northeast or anything. It's totally to be consistent. And I think we had talked, and we've talked a couple times on the phone now, and I gave you sort of my interpretation was, as if the conversation breaks down at the fire marshal and the fire chief or your board, there's options to move up to Bobby and even to myself, and then ultimately, if you really want to argue, or not argue, discuss or debate, the board's here to debate too. But again, it's not because ultimately, if it's going to be a large investment, our board in a roundabout way, they're going to sooner or later they're going to have to make a decision. So it'd be nice to come to them in a concerted effort from the fire marshal's office and from the fire department together, saying this was needed. It's justified. It's needed for the department. It's needed for the tax district. It's needed to help respond to mutual aid, and that's all we're asking for. So believe me, this is a debate and a conversation. I don't think Mr. Nickel and I are having any ill feelings for each other. No, not at all. It's just a debate, and it's just a matter of consistency. That's the way we tried to be consistent to all the departments. And again, I think there was 2 other departments that we actually had conversations with, and I don't know if you had some more, but it was, once we described what our or how we interpreted the ordinance or the contract, that they were okay with it, so.
Well, it just seems to me like it's taking away their right to make decisions for their fire department, and they're paying for it. Why does the fire marshal have to be involved except for the fact that they come to him and tell him what they're going to buy?
Well, just depends on the level of accountability that you want. I can give you an example of, prior to this contract, there's 2 departments that are purchasing apparatus right now that have signed contracts. Both departments have purchased what is classified as a pumper tanker, in the fact that it carries 1,000 gallons of water with a 1,500-gallon GPM pump. But one department is paying $367,000 for a truck, while another department is paying $570,000. That's a $200,000 difference. And if a department's coming and asking for a tax increase, why is a department purchasing a Cadillac of a fire truck when they could have dealt with a Ford Expedition that both provide the need of the department?
Well, everybody don't want a Ford. Some people want a Cadillac.
You're right.
And Mr. Burge, at one board meeting, it was told to us that it doesn't matter what we need, we got the money, so we should be able to spend it the way we want. As a department head who's charged with managing a department that manages this contract, and we also have general statute and ordinance authority to manage the fire protection in this county, comments like that and actions like that bother me. So again, we tried to find a medium where there's just that another layer of accountability that'll protect the taxpayer. And that's all that the intent was this for.
Jason, you haven't had a chance.
Sure. Mr. Nichols, let me say first, thank you for your tremendous service. I think that's wonderful. I'm constantly amazed by how much service we get from our volunteer firefighters and really how little compensation that you all get. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
I understand your position very well. And I sympathize with you. I'm going to think hard about this because I appreciate the fact that you gave me so much history as well. I mean, you really have been autonomous for a long period of time. And so one of my questions for our staff is, have we had problems with their fire department? Do they have a good track record of making good quality purchases that you feel like are reasonable and within what you would subscribe? Or do you feel like that they have a history of that this provision would be a provision that would be necessary for their fire department?
Well, the board's changed, so it's hard to say that the board that's in place now, are going to look at this and, or make the best decision for the citizens, in the past. I know the department purchased an old ladder truck. It wasn't really warranted for the district. In talks that I had with the chief when they bought that truck, I know that they had to spend a lot of money on it because it would not pass the servicing ladder test that's required, and the department had to end up selling it. I don't know if you'd consider that a good decision, bad decision, but otherwise, the other equipment that they have, I can't say that, the other equipment that they've got is not equipment that it's needed, what they have, so it's just hard to say. The board's changed.
Mr. Nichols, do you agree with that assessment of the truck that he mentioned?
Yeah, I am familiar with that situation.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a great deal of money, though. We're not talking about a $300,000 or $400,000 investment. That was the previous fire chief and the previous board. And the situation was we did buy the used equipment. It was justified because even though it's a ladder truck and we don't have tall buildings in the district, we have a lot of homes in the district that are 3 stories tall. So it was felt that with a ladder truck, it would give the firemen a safer access to the roof to be able to chop a hole in the roof and vent.
Sure.
Rather than try to put ladders up 3 stories tall. So that was the justification of it once the equipment was purchased. And the reason the department bought it is they bought it from another department. And the reason they did buy it is because it was a low cost. And for the little bit of money that was being spent on it and the advantage it provided in gaining access to the roofs of those 3-story homes and improving the firemen's safety so they didn't have to have ladders up on the roof. They could lay the ladder down from the fire truck and gain access to it. For safety reasons, the department decided to purchase it. After the purchase, as Steve said, the ladder, while it was in the shop, one of the rungs was found broken or broken during the inspection, and they're incredibly expensive to replace a ladder. You can't fix it. You have to replace the entire section of ladder. So the department did spend several $1,000s to repair the equipment. We felt like that we had a piece of equipment that we didn't know that we might not have to sink more money into, so therefore the decision was made to sell it and do without that piece of equipment. Because we certainly did not want to go out and buy a $500,000 ladder truck, but this purchase was not anything like that.
Yeah. And I think Mr. Langer's point is not that it wasn't justified for you to buy the ladder truck itself, but that the condition that you bought the truck in was questionable. And with as much purchasing as him and his department do, maybe their expertise would be helpful in evaluating it, particularly because all of your equipment is used, right?
No, the last truck we bought was new.
Okay. Well, a lot of your equipment is used?
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah. I think perhaps one of the points that he's making is that in evaluating used equipment, with them consistently buying it and things like that, they may be a little bit better evaluators because they're doing so much more of it. Mr. Langer, what would we use for volunteer fire services if the Flow Store Fire Department didn't want to sign this contract, and Jonathan had talked about the effectiveness of the previous year's contract, but let's say at some point they decide they don't want to be part of this contract anymore. What would we use for volunteer fire department services there?
Well, the county staff would evaluate the district. We would look at the departments surrounding the district and look to see if it could be covered by those departments.
What do you think the chances of that are?
Midland Station 2 is right. I mean, the property next door is to their district. You have a new station coming online in Harrisburg. The chances are that pretty great that I would say 95% of their district could be covered by those other departments.
Now, Mr. Nichols, if we did not word the contract the way that you have requested us to word it, would your fire department continue to serve this area?
Yeah, we have no intention of abandoning the area, but we're appealing it to the Board of Commissioners because we feel very strongly that as a corporation, we should be able to make our own decision after consulting with the Fire Marshal's office.
Yeah. Another question that I have is, Mike had talked about the ramifications of a bad decision. So let's say y'all had made a bad decision and you had bought a piece of equipment like the one that you had bought, but it was substantially more money. And who ends up, are we ultimately on the hook for that, Mike? You had said that
No, ultimately, the district is the one that's assuming the debt.
Yeah.
However, the majority of your funding for all the districts comes from that tax, from the taxing district.
So if they make a bad purchase and they come to us and say, we made a bad purchase and we would like to have an increased tax rate, we have the authority to say no?
That's correct.
Yeah.
You set it, it's set annually.
Now, I suspect that if you do need a tax increase in the future, that if you work with Mr. Langer and Mr. Smith, that they would be much more likely to approve you seeking that tax increase as opposed to reflecting negatively on it. Are you interested in that benefit of this? If you've worked with them from the very beginning and gotten their approval beforehand, I think that that would be something that would be more likely to reflect positively on than if you made a decision on your own, they might reflect negatively on it. Is that sort of being pre-qualified beneficial to you?
Perhaps. I don't anticipate us asking for a tax increase anytime soon because we are so conservative with our expenses. But in the event that did happen, certainly, and that's why we're in full agreement with consulting with the fire departments. And if they recommend that we do not buy a piece of equipment or that we buy a Chevrolet instead of a Cadillac or what have you, certainly we're going to listen to that and take it into serious consideration. We're not out to buy a Cadillac fire engine, just because we have the money to do so. Yeah.
I feel like that this issue is taking a lot of time, and I apologize that I've asked so many questions, but Mr. Nichols, I do sympathize with your desire to make decisions for yourself. You all have done a tremendous job out there for a long time, and I certainly understand that. This is a challenging situation, and I want to make sure that you feel like that you've been completely heard by this board in terms of moving forward, and I appreciate you giving me so much information.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? if you can, which I know you have a note, make sure that you get the fire study. I guess I would make a comment that the contracts are for a year? Do we do annual contracts?
Well, we found out through this process that our contracts and the way they're worded are actually, I guess, perpetual, so.
Okay.
The contracts that we now have in place with the other departments will.
Okay, so I guess my point, I guess, I like consistency among all, so that we know that we're treating everybody the same and we're treating everybody fairly. And so when I read into this, I guess my biggest concern would be that if we make the change, and I know that you're saying that you don't have plans right now, but let's just say that you bought a piece of equipment that has a 25-year life expectancy, and as you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the artificial turf, there's something else comes out and it's different and it's better and it's whatever, and 10 years into that, you decide that you're going to trade it in and get something new, and as a result of that trade, in order to pay for it, it has to have a tax increase. And that's where we get put in the position of approving. And we have, for your information, we have not approved tax increases before. There's been a couple of them, I know, that since I've been on this board, because we didn't have enough information that we felt like we justified it. And the biggest calls, emails, messages I get with fire districts are residents who say, don't increase my tax rate, and they don't need it. And I don't know these, I don't know this person versus this person, but those are the ones that call, and it may be that they don't ever show up at any of your meetings, and that you've never heard from them. You know they live there because of their address, but you've never really heard anything from them. But that's where we get the phone calls, is every year when we set that tax rate. So that would be my comment would be about consistency. So, so I don't know as far as how we need to proceed with this one. If it's, we would put it on the agenda as far as if we want to make the change or we don't want to make the change. And then we would, however that vote goes, then we would let you know, if we agreed to changing the red line version or if we decided to stay the same, and we would present that back to you for signature after the 18th. So
Okay.
that's the way that I read it. So would you agree? Okay. Any other comments on that one? Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's do the 414 Midland. Mayor Kitts is not with us tonight, however.
Just me.
Okay. Also, as they're coming up, Commissioners own 4.3 and 4.4 concerning the multipurpose fields at Franklin Park. Based on our conversation about the Central Cabarrus field, I went to that item. I have a question about the spreadsheet numbers. I think there is an error in the numbers. Is that correct? Yes. We're trying to do some more research, so we're going to pull that for tonight. And I would like to recommend that we pull that, let these fine folks go ahead, and we will put it on next month, okay? But I want to make sure that the numbers that we are talking about are in fact verified and double-checked, and then we can go forward, okay? Thank you all. I apologize for you being with us so late to get to this point, but I do think it's important that we make sure we have the right numbers in there. Absolutely. That we make a very well-informed decision on that. So the question that I had, if you will look at that, when we get away from here, if you'll look at that, I think it was, originally we talked about one turf and one artificial and one real. I think the number stayed as one artificial and one real, and I don't think we have in that amount two artificials. And we want to make sure, and the 900,000 in there versus they said 800, we need to make sure that number's right before we get into it. So I just want to explain that. So, okay, library, request to approve Midland Library concept. Thank you for being very patient.
I bring more greetings from the south side of 49 tonight. It seems like we've had quite a bit on the agenda for that area, where it makes us proud in the southern part of the county. My name is Richard Flo, and I serve as the town's planning, zoning, and subdivision administrator, and I had originally been asked to be here to assist with the answering of questions. However, first of all, our Mayor Pro Tem, Mike Talent, who had planned to be here tonight as well, had to cancel due to something that had come up, and then I received a call just as the meeting was beginning from our mayor, Kathy Kitts, that she was no longer going to be able to attend as well, taking care of town business. So I'll do my best to answer questions, but I didn't come prepared for any presentation, so I'm going to wing it. The purpose of tonight's meeting was really to start the process of developing a dialogue with the county regarding the construction of our new town hall and library facility, which should be still over a year before it's really going to be complete or anything like that. But we didn't want to wait too long before we started discussing some of the details of how we envision working together on that type of venture. And it could be anything from utilities, as it says in the memo, to something else, some other component. And I don't know exactly how the county would like to proceed with this. This is a new one for me, doing this building and as a I guess a joint use type of building. The town operating a majority of the building and the county providing a function within another portion of the building, and how that would unfold. But we also have representatives of the library system, so we have that expertise here tonight. And I will try to answer questions about the project if those arise and things of that nature.
Can you pull up the grid? I'll let Dana go through this, but basically we pulled the town of Harrisburg's agreement when we did the Harrisburg Library, and went through the process of what the town was responsible for versus what the county was responsible for. Had a little bit of help from Kyle Billiford because we're not a standalone building. So there will be prorated cost based on square footage, but pretty much have divided the cost between what the town would be responsible for and what the county would. But Dana can give you more details about her specific side of the cost and what the furnishings would be from the town's perspective.
The first thing we have on there is approximately $90,000 for the initial furnishings and equipment. That's based on the 3,000 square foot plan that I've seen. There's an architectural plan that has 3D rendering of what the library would look like, and those costs are based on some costs that we paid for with the renovation of the Concord Library in regards to furniture. So they're more or less real-time costs. And those would be the responsibility of the town, or if they assign that to the Midland Friends of the Library. The next column is the additional furnishings and equipment. That would be things like a copy machine, computers both for the public and the staff, things like that. And if there were things once we moved into the building, because it takes time once you move into a building to decide what you really need as far as equipment and furnishings. So that's approximately $25,000. The next part is the operational costs of the library facility, and these are the costs that are going to happen year after year after year. These are costs for staff, and we've based the staffing on the the Mount Pleasant Library. Mount Pleasant Library is just slightly larger than what this library is, so we're basing those costs on the Mount Pleasant Library. We would also need money for library materials, supplies, programs, and things like that, which is approximately $153,000 a year. We, of course, cannot open the library without an initial purchase of an opening day collection. $160,000 will fill their shelves to about 50% capacity, so it's not going to be a fully stocked library, but it'll be a place to start. Then there'll be maintenance, custodial costs, utilities. That would be the responsibility of the county. Insurance, liability insurance, of course, is shared by the county and the town. And the total cost to the county is $338,000 approximately, with about $153,000 of those recurring annually.
And those are estimated costs. They are not exact costs, so I just want to definitely point that out. But to put this grid together to give you an idea of who pays for what and approximately what those costs would be. So I just want to be clear that they are not perfect, but they were estimated.
Best guesses.
Okay, these costs would be included in our next budget, correct?
Yeah, they're in the 5-year plan that was presented to you at the last budget. There's a show for the increase in some operational costs and staffing. The $160,000 I do not believe was placed in there. I think it was just the reoccurring operational cost, or the $25,000 in the furnishings. But Dana has a way of getting grant money, so there's no telling what she's got up her sleeve as far as that funding is concerned.
Okay, but the idea behind this at this time is that they're building a building, and so we would be telling them that go ahead and build a building, go ahead and put in library space, and that we will put that is definitely will be included in our budget for next year, because you're not going to build it if we're not agreeing to fund it. If we're not agreeing to help fund the library space, then you would have to adjust your plans not to include that space in there. Or it would be a shell space until we did agree
It
to.
would probably remain a shell space because we're fast approaching that point to where if we got word tonight, then we might be able to change the building. We are moving forward. Our plans have actually even been submitted for permits and things of that nature. So it's moving along, mostly because we know we're going to need the space. We have the town and a large number of volunteers have started a Friends of the Midland Library and are starting their fundraising campaigns now. There's been quite a bit of conversation in the community about it and excitement in the community about it because really south of 49 there's not a community center, if you will. I mean, everything, there are some school-related facilities, but this is the first thing that would really be open to the public across the board. And other than some, I guess, Harrisburg, I take that back, I don't mean to insult Harrisburg, but for the bulk of that part of the county, south of 49. The construction schedule on that building is possibly such that some of your recurring costs may not be fully necessary in that first fiscal year. Don't know yet exactly how much prorating would take place, but let's just assume it might be a half a year or something like that until we get a little further down the road with our construction schedule. We won't know that exactly, but assume that the recurring expense side would only be about a half a year, which I know is not much. Most of it's setting up the library.
Well, pretty much what's before us, Commissioners, is we've talked about this for a good while now, about adding library space in Midland. So really what this is we would be affirming the fact that we want to go forward with the library space, knowing that it would then, staff would know to go ahead and put these costs into the budget for next year, either prorated or the full amount, whatever the amount is decided upon. As you said, that was an estimate, and move forward. So, Chris, do you want to start with questions?
Yeah.
Comments?
I know this is slightly different than any of our other library facilities, seeing that this would be in the Midland Town Hall rather than a freestanding location. Just curious about maintenance, custodial services, utilities. I'm not sure how they're going to be able to separate out what our power bill would be or anything of that nature. So, I would like to see some agreement where the town would take care of the, the power bill or, whatever that may be.
To pay its own?
Yeah.
To meter that separately? I think that can be done.
Can be metered separately?
We would just need to speak with the architects before it goes too far down to the finish line so that those sorts of things are covered. But just to point a couple things out, it sounds easier to do than it actually is. For example, the restroom facilities on the second floor are for the entire second floor.
Correct.
So the library would be using approximately half of the half of the what we'll call leasable space, because
Right.
there's common area like the corridor where the elevator, all those sorts of components are that are not segregated between the library side and say the other side of the second floor. So even if we metered for electricity within that unit, it still wouldn't be quite equitable on elevator activity, for example. So
Right.
you can see that it doesn't quite come out right.
Well, that's where I would like to see the county responsible for the books, the staff, and then the town take care of the utilities. That being in their building, I think that would be easier for the town to take care of the power bill, whatever those utilities consist of, the custodial work, rather than trying to split that out, because I think that would be difficult to do. So if we provide the staff and the books and the other things here listed, then that would be okay with me.
Steve?
The estimated figures that we have here, is there anything different about these than what we do with the Harrisburg and Mount Pleasant libraries?
The operational costs are primarily based on the staffing levels at the Mount Pleasant Library. We have 2 full-time and 2
Right.
part-time staff, so they're right on par with those. The library materials is very equitable to what the Mount Pleasant Library receives.
Right, so the startup cost as far as the initial purchase of the collection, similar. We pay the utilities at the other facilities.
We do.
Yeah, which I feel very strongly that we should keep it consistent. I don't see splitting up utilities as being a big issue. It's quite common for multi-tenant spaces. That formula could be easily arrived at. So yeah, I'm very much in favor of it and very excited for Midland to be moving forward with the project.
Larry?
Oh, yeah, when you talk about splitting up utilities, you're also talking about water. Somebody got to pay the water bill.
Yeah, Kyle, how are you doing that at Mount Pleasant? Come on up.
You're talking about an elevator that's
Sure.
not part of that
Right.
part of the building. Maintenance got to be done on it.
The conversation I had had with Midland earlier was that they wouldn't know their true operational cost of that building until probably year 2 of having it open, because everything the first year is going to be under warranty, and they're probably going to carry that on some of the things like the elevators and things like that. We hadn't put together a figure because it'll depend on really what the operational costs of that building are. I haven't even seen the designs, if it's a central system, if it's package units, or how they're going to divide that up. I know how we do it in some of our other buildings, but there will be no running water in the library part per se, but I guess what you're speaking about, Commissioner Burge, would be how many
Restrooms
patrons do we have that go in and use the restrooms? And I don't believe we were looking at doing a count of how many people you have come in that library and then assigning a flushes per person and gallons per flush. I don't believe that's what you were looking at. So we were probably going to do the utilities by square footage, total square footage of the building, and then what square footage of our space is, and then probably assign a common area assignment cost.
Yes, that's correct.
That's what we had discussed because of the common areas that, like the halls, corridors, elevators, stairwells, all those sorts of things. So it's not a pure square footage. You look at what you might call gross leasable area, which would be that area that's in the library space or in the other upfittable space upstairs or in the actual town hall downstairs. And if you do it that way, you're probably talking about a 25% county, 75% town type of split. Now, 1/2 of the second story would not be occupied at this point in time, so it might be more of a 1/3, 2/3 type of split, while that other space just sits there empty. And then when it's occupied, then it becomes a 25% and 50% for the town and 25% for whatever the other is. If it's another agency that maybe it's got a senior citizen center in it, or maybe it's a business that leases it for 10 years or 5 years before, as the town grows.
We would probably debate that. We would still consider our 3,000 square feet as our 3,000 square feet. We would go
Yeah,
from
your
there.
3,000 would be yours, but the prorating would be based on that portion of the upfit finished building, would be my speculation on it. And I think that's a part of this initial dialogue, is to talk about these topics and to figure out how we want to get our respective teams together to iron that stuff out so that it's equitable for all, because we're not here to take advantage of anybody. We are proud to be able to do this project and very proud of the ability to do it in cooperation and partnership with the county. I think it's a very proud experience for the town to be able to work with the county.
We've had many conversations over the last several years. Midland has requested and voiced a need and for a library. unwritten policy has always been, that, at least in practice, is that the community supplies the building. And at the time, for many years, Midland wasn't able to do that. And now they are. So why are we here where we are right now? Midland's made the step to build a town hall. Before, as Mr. Flo is saying, they're to the point with the architect. They're going to start programming that building on the interior. They're going to start spending some more design money. I told or requested the town administrator that their board formally make the request from you guys, so that before they go and start expending additional money, that you're committed to move in that direction. The rest of the details, I think we can work those out over the next year during construction, and we'll make sure it's equitable and fair to both parties. But the biggest thing is they're ready to start designing. I didn't want them to start designing until they felt until I felt some assurance, but also them that you guys were going to be in a position to support it or not support it. So
right. The
that's
county's gross leasable area portion that's set aside in the current design right now, that would need to be, once you make the decision, then we would go forward with upfits, things of that nature, is about 3,000 square feet.
Right.
And you've got the two halves of the upstairs at about 3,000 each, and then that does not include the corridors. And then downstairs, you've got 3,000 on each side that does not include the corridors and stairwells and things of that nature.
Are you okay with it as far as how we're going out? Jason?
Sure. This is sort of a crossroads for the last 2-3 weeks of my life, because I went down to the Midland Town Center opening, and then last week Dana took me on a tour of all the libraries, so that was tremendous. And I do want to point out here that Pam told me that Dana was awarded Librarian of the Year last year, so we have a tremendous asset here with us. My only concern about talking about this at this point is a concern that I read in the newspaper that was voiced by one of your council people, that was Don McSheehan, that this was a premature conversation. And from my attendance at the Midland groundbreaking, the fact that funding for this library was not in place was mentioned a couple of times in terms of making fundraising efforts and things like that. And the Friends at the Library have been tasked with raising $185,000, and there was not I would say, a strong conviction that that money will be raised by the time the building opens. And so while design might be important, I don't think we're holding back in terms of changing the space from a shell space to a fully functional library space by making a decision, because they don't have the money to upfit the facility right now anyway. I suspect that you are going to build a shell space in either instance, really, because you don't have the money for upfit. Is that right?
That's right. It's going to be built as a two-story building. We're not going to come back later and try to do an expansion on the building or anything like that. We're building the building as a kind of a long-term investment in the town to, local government leaders really need to lead, not follow. And so that's the first step in that new downtown area, was to go ahead and start that project and get that moving. And it has drawn a tremendous amount of attention. And I'll agree with you that right now, while we're in that election season, there's all kinds of things. Mr. McSheehan's running for mayor, so of course they're divvying up which side of the equation they're on and things of that nature. And I work for the board, so whomever succeeds in the elections is who we'll serve. And that'll be the will of the people there. For now, I am pressing forward with the charge that I have from the acting council, and that is to bring the two-story building into reality, and and actually just to be here to answer questions about the technical side. And hopefully those two were going to be here, Mayor Pro Tem Talent and of course Mayor Kitts, to be able to answer questions regarding timing and things of that nature. So I'm going to have to defer commentary on whether it's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, because a lot of those initiatives are just starting. But what I do want to underscore again is that they didn't want to wait. They wanted to start the conversation with you, even if we don't have a decision tonight or anything, or excuse me, at your 18th meeting on the 18th, but at least to make sure that this conversation is continuing to progress.
And I would say that it's quite fortuitous that tomorrow is Election Day. So for your comment, we may know tomorrow night if the town council stays the same or if there's a change in it and how we would proceed. So surely by the 18th, we'll have some information. And I think it might be helpful on the 18th if Mayor Kitts, a representative from the town council comes and is able to answer any questions.
The only thing I would like to offer is this is a personal perspective, but it's in my official capacity with the town, and that was that at that same ceremony, Councilman McSheehan pulled me to the side, and he told me, he said, no matter how the election goes, we're going forward with this project. So, you know, what you read in the papers and the way that happens, y'all know better than me. But that's the assurance I've had from both of our leaders as I try to implement and conduct the daily duties of my job.
I think the project is absolutely going forward. It's just a matter, the only point that I was making is a matter of timing, and I think that was the only point that I read in the article about whether this is ripe for a decision or not. And my comments were based more from the ceremony on what Mayor Pro Tem Talent had talked about in terms of their fundraising efforts and anything else.
They just started.
Yeah.
I got my commitment form the other day from them.
Well, and, you know, if it goes into a budget, it is proposed, you know, as part of the budget, and if they don't build the building, then they don't get the fund. So, you know, that does happen as part of a budget. I know that we've talked for many years, and the people of Midland have voiced that they would like to have a library down there, and this seems to be the best way, you know, to help that area out. So, you know.
I am fully in favor of supporting that library. I would prefer, I mean, I don't know that there's anything for us to vote on at the 18th meeting, and that's more my comment. I think I like the comments of opening this dialogue and things like that. I just don't feel like there's anything for us to vote on the 18th, to be honest.
I think that what we have before us is a request to approve the concept. So that as they're designing, they can go ahead and include that in their design.
Right. The architects are getting on board, and we want to make sure that we have a voice in that design of our space. And they were hoping to do it all at one time, the design. Can they wait 6 months and design our space later? Sure, but I did not want the town of Midland to continue moving forward thinking that our board was going to endorse it, and then all of a sudden the vote changes. So that's the biggest reason why they're here. They're ready to move forward and start designing that interior of the building, and if we're going to be a part of it, we want to be at the table with the design, but also I want them to have the assurance, because I don't want 6 months, you know, they go into this thing 6 months, and then all of a sudden our board makes a decision that's contrary to what they're thinking, and then all of a sudden we're back and forth. That's my biggest thing.
So what will be the appropriate action at our meeting, that we make a motion to officially support this proposal so that they will have that in hand, or what?
The letter.
Well, we have it under consent. Sorry, I switched the page.
I don't have it in front of me.
It's the motion to approve Midland Library concept and begin negotiations with the town of Midland for operating cost. So it's just our way of saying, yes, we agree and we want to proceed, so that they know that we're committed to the process.
Okay. My question was basically, you know, what do they want? What will provide them with the level of assurance that we intend to go forward, as we have with other communities in the county? So maybe you might answer that, Richard.
Well, I think that the big thing that we would like to have is not just open negotiations or discussions and things of that nature, but maybe of something from the county commissioners to formally establish that working committee or whatever it may be, that, you know, you may charge the manager to select some folks to work together with us or something like that. Just something, I think, that will help that, as compared to other towns, that very new town feel that it's starting to get real, you know, because so much has not been a reality. Everything has been a concept for them for their first 10 years and even 12 years, and we're just now getting under contract the construction of new sewer lines and other things that are happening there. So the first real steps of local government action to be able to grow the community there and to be able to establish not just public services like the town hall and library facility, but the commercial services, the grocery stores, the fundamental basics. We got our first national franchise in 2012 with Tractor Supply. That's huge for a newly incorporated Crossroads area. And so I think that something, a sign from this commission that that you're willing to work together with the town and show them that is really, and whatever that form is really up to you, but to demonstrate to them that we can work together.
And from a grant writing perspective, it would be helpful for me to be able to write a grant that says that the county commissioners are behind this project. Otherwise, it'll be harder to get grant funding.
That said everything I couldn't say.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Let's go to 4.5. Trying to knock these next ones out in order. Something unique for tonight. 4.5, Ms. Strong, Active Living and Parks Department ordinance related to North Carolina General Statute 14-415.23. Welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Just add a couple of things in addition to what is in the agenda item that I wanted to share with you before we started discussing or answering your questions. When the new general statute was passed, I believe it was October of 2011, was the first time for the carry conceal permit holders being able to carry guns into parks. And then they did some work on it, and it came around October, November, December of 2012, somewhere in that neighborhood. And we started working with our park commission at that time. We took the law to them, the new statute to them, and said, here's what it says. Anyone with a carry conceal permit is allowed to carry into any park, local, state, national, whatever it is, except for 4 specific areas. And those 4 specific areas were playgrounds, swimming pools, recreation centers, and athletic complexes, which they went back and changed. They took playgrounds out just a few months ago. So it got down to 3. So back in April of 2012, we presented this to our park commission, and then May of 2012, they voted to recommend sending this to the Board of Commissioners. And then in August of 2012, after we had done an update on our park ordinance, that was in there as well. Once the general statute passed, we removed the signs at all of the parks that said no guns permitted, because we didn't have one that said you could carry a handgun in if you had a carry conceal permit, but open carry is not allowed. And we were just waiting on the ordinance to be updated or reviewed or talked about before we made new signs to go up, because it did only affect parks with these particular changes. City of Concord passed their ordinance last year. They've gone back and done a revision on that now to take playgrounds out so that it only has the 3 areas where you cannot carry into. They have their signs up. The City of Kannapolis has their ordinance passed. They are in the process of working with their attorney to get their signs made, and I misquoted in there with Harrisburg. They are speaking with the attorney now on how they want to proceed. So they have not passed it at this point, but Concord and Kannapolis have. There's been a lot of controversy, needless to say, over the last year. I attended a webinar just last month that answered a lot of questions from one of the UNC government professors. Led this, and he had a lot of good information on it, and I shared that with Mr. Cook and Mr. Downs. So just to kind of keep everybody up to speed on where we are and what is going on across the state. And he did offer some good explanation, like an athletic complex. Is that just the fields? what does that include? And so they're interpreting concessions, bathrooms, bleachers, and if the parking lot is in close proximity, then parking lot as well. Same thing with the pool. Obviously, it's not just in the pool in the water. I don't think anybody's going to take their gun in there, or not intentionally anyway. But it's the deck and the bathrooms and the concession and the changing area and the parking if it is in close proximity. The recreation center is anything inside, which includes all of its amenities from bathrooms or whatever, not one specific, not a gym or a room or whatever. The recreation center, like a senior center, I've asked that question. I have not got an answer back yet from that. It's been a few weeks. So, because what they were telling us in the webinar was that the reason recreation center was listed as one of the areas you couldn't carry is because of competitions, athletic competitions, things that happen in the gymnasium. And so we said, there's a lot of competition in the senior center, so we wanted to make sure that was taken care of too. Some people get pretty serious, so I do not have an answer on that yet. But what we wanted to do tonight is to find out what direction you wanted to go with carry conceal as well as open carry. Because right now, we don't have any of it prohibited.
Okay. Jason, do you want to start? Since I've been starting on this end, give you a chance to start.
Sure. I was looking, I have spent some time, we have one of our constituents that had emailed me about this, and I spent some time looking at the law and also helping her with Concord. I think that the law itself contains very specific definitions of what all of these things are under subpart C and D, and I don't think that the specificity and the limitations that are included in the law are included accurately in this summary. For instance, athletic fields, it's only an athletic field where the city is responsible for scheduling an event and at those scheduled events. It is very specific. And before we go too far down the road with respect to what we would like to do, we probably need to get a better idea of what we can do, and Mr. Cook may have the definitions of those things. As soon as you started talking, Londa, I started trying to pull it up, but I just couldn't get it in fast enough time because
What are you wanting?
the definitions of those, the actual specific legislation.
Well, yeah, and this is not to, the purpose of this is not to spell out every part of the law. It's just to find out what direction you want so that we can look at the ordinance. Because it also says that we have to give the address of every facility. If we prohibit it, we have to have the address of each facility and the specific areas of where it would be prohibited in the ordinance, and the Board of Commissioners for us would have to approve that ordinance. I mean, there's a lot of little things like that, but I didn't really put them in the agenda.
I would just say.
And the county, whenever the counties make, I guess if the city was scheduling games on the soccer complex, it would be the same thing, I would assume.
My position on concealed carry broadly is we don't usually have problems with people with concealed carry. They are vetted by our sheriff, and if they want to carry a gun on their property, and I feel like all county property is the public's property, so if you want to carry a gun on your own property, then I think the Constitution allows you to do that, and I don't have any problem with putting these things in as liberally as we can to allow them as much carry as we feel like the law allows us to put in. That would be my big picture perspective. If somebody's going to carry a gun on to a piece of property to do damage, the law's not going to stop them. And I think that the email that I actually got was from a woman who had 2 children. I think she said she had twins. And actually, I think she had more than 2 children. And she has not come to our parks because she did not feel safe and did not feel like that she could defend herself in some of the parks that we have, for instance, Frank Lisk and things like that. I mean, you can really get out there away from a lot of people, and I don't have any problem with allowing people to defend themselves.
I don't have no problem if people's got permits, whether they open or concealed. The problem I have is them people don't have permits that's carrying guns. And there's a lot of them out there. There's more of them out there without permits than there are with permits. So how you gonna stop it? They taking guns in the park every day now.
I think we should remain consistent with what the municipalities do, so that all parks throughout the county, whether they be city or county, would be consistent. So that would be my position.
I don't have a problem with concealed carry in the parks. I don't have an issue at all with it.
Well, as I understand it, you want some guidance from us on what kind of signs we would put out and how we would move forward. Is that what you're asking for, or?
No, just for guidance on, excuse me, work for the update of the ordinance.
Of the ordinance, okay.
City of Concord basically just revised their, I read their ordinance, their updated ordinance, and they just said a one-sentence statement that essentially concealed carry shall be allowed in conformity with the subsection C and D of the new article. I think it's, subsection C and D are where those descriptions are, and that's what City of Concord did. One sentence, that was it.
I think that, I agree with Steve. I think we need to, you don't want to have confusion over, is this a county park or is this a city park? I have not read the City of Concord's ordinance, so I would like to get a copy of that, and so that I have time to look at it. Thank you so much
The
for
City of
providing it
Concord,
so quickly
the
to
City
me.
of Concord prohibits in the 3 areas of which the law allows you to prohibit in. You can carry it in except for the athletic complex, pool, and the recreation facilities.
Okay, what's the timeline that we have on updating our ordinance and making a decision?
There is none. It's just coming up time to Londa said she had talked with her board about it, and she's looking at, we've asked everybody to start looking at their ordinances to get them updated. Some of them have been in without revision in many years, so this was an opportunity. The law has changed a couple of times on these concealed carries. As Commissioner Osterreich's gotten calls, we've gotten calls too about the signage in there, and we've changed it a couple of times, and then I think now we've just taken it down, waiting on the next. And so we're to the point now, they're expensive to keep changing signs in and out, and they're ready to look at the ordinance, so that's why we're asking you guys, just give us some direction on that, in that direction, and we will make those amendments to the ordinance as you feel necessary, and then we'll provide the signage to support it.
Can I just ask then, we have it on for an action item. It's not on consent. It's on action item for our regular meeting. So if you could make sure that we all get a copy of the City of Concord ordinance so that we can look over it. Make sure that we get, if we can, get a copy of the statute so that we can look at that easily and see. And then if you have a recommendation that you want to provide for us so that we'll at least have something to start with, then, you've heard pretty much the sentiment. I think we need to follow the statute that's out there, and I think we need to be consistent so that we don't confuse everybody. That would be the 2 things I would look at. And I think if it's legal, then it's legal.
Right.
So, that's kind of an easy way to put it. I don't have a concealed carry permit personally, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people out there that have them and that want to have it. And I agree with you. I think people are doing all kinds of things that we don't know about.
So we will provide you with, I believe Kannapolis also has an adopted ordinance. So we'll provide you with any municipality adopted ordinance and anything that's being considered. There is school of government interpretation of this. I think Commissioner Osterreich is exactly right. Since it's been adopted, there's been questions about the athletic fields and what exactly and precisely that encompasses. And even within the last few weeks, we've seen a number of interpretations or best guesses until the courts actually make some decisions with it, if they should make some decisions. We'll provide you with all that background material too.
Yeah, I think if we have that, and then, obviously we'll look over everything between now and our meeting in 2 weeks. And we can decide if we leave it on there, if we don't feel like we have enough information on the 18th, we can always pull it off at that time and put it on in December so that we can get it right, hopefully get it as right as we can, I guess, the first time. We don't want to be changing around. I agree with you. We don't need to keep changing and confusing people.
And just for everybody's information, the statute that was included in our agenda is not the most recent version of that statute.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I have one other thing just to add for the next 2 weeks while y'all are thinking. Carry, everybody here can have a carry, conceal, a gun is permit as far as I'm concerned, doesn't bother me. But when I watch the people at the parks, the number of fights that there are, the number of athletic events that people get heated and daddies come flying out of the stands, or mamas come flying out of the stands. I had a mama pull a gun on me at a soccer game. This has been a long time ago. So there have been a lot of those incidents, and most of the reunion or reservation fights happen between their own families. It's not between this shelter and this shelter. They get all bent out of shape, and when you see those things, and even though alcohol is banned, people come in that have been consuming, and then when you have that, it's just a different world when you see what's going on. It's not like going to the church and having a nice family picnic. So just a few of those things over the last several years, over the last 30 years that I've observed, just for the back of your mind when you're thinking about that.
And I would just say that my comments were limited specifically to people that do have concealed carry permits. And I don't know that all the people that you mentioned had their permits.
Several of them did. I know them.
Well, thank you.
Unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. 4.6, QSCB interest earnings. Pam?
As we talked about the sales tax monies that was left over the sales tax monies that were set aside from Cabarrus County Schools, that we had to expend those actual monies on the projects. The same is so for the interest earnings on the QSCB monies. And last month, you suspended your rules at the work session, and you provided funding to Kannapolis City Schools to provide for the emergency generator, and we used fund balance for $38,138. So since the interest earnings are right now at $12,298, and there will probably be a smidgen more between now and April, since those were county funds that we used, I would propose that we take those interest earnings and we reduce our fund balance contribution and use the QSCAB's interest earnings to make up part of that difference and not split it between schools, because that was our money that we associated to that project, and that we will still have to tweak it when we get to April. It won't be a big change, but we would make it to be the exact dollar figure so that there would be nothing left on the table as far as interest earnings were concerned at the end of the project.
All right, comments or questions? Anybody? I mean, I think it's a good use of, we definitely don't want to give any money back, as I understand it. If we give back $1,000, we still have to pay the $1,000. So we want to make sure that it hits it perfectly, and you'd like to have, just as this would be, I guess, one little project that would go over just enough so that it's not a whole lot of money to go over, but all of it is accounted for. So that made sense to me when you proposed it. So everybody's good with that? Okay, good. Thank you. 4.7, abandonment of from NCDOT maintenance system.
North Carolina DOT Division 10 has done an audit of the roads that they maintain, and then discovered that in the former Bethel Elementary School, they maintain a portion of the parking lot. It actually had an SR number assigned to it. They've asked for a resolution from the board supporting the abandonment of that from the maintenance system.
Okay, questions? Okay, no questions? That makes good sense too. 4.8, resolution transferring ownership of Weddington Communications Tower.
Emergency Management was able to obtain a grant some years ago that helped us build 2 towers, one in Midland and one off of Weddington Road. The one on Weddington Road is on property owned by the City of Concord and has been operated and maintained by the city. What we found, however, is that that is our asset. So our attorney and the City of Concord attorney have worked on mechanism to transfer ownership of that, to recognize that has been considered part of their system and all the joint radio system agreements we have, and it would transfer that ownership. So our attorneys put together a resolution for you to adopt to help affect that.
Okay, any questions on this item or comments? Okay, thank you. 4.9, update on Raging Ridge Road extension and bridge.
This is one, and again, this has been going on so long, I'm not completely sure. I know some of you have more familiarity with this than others, but it is an extension. The middle school and high school are accessed by Raging Ridge Road off of Hickory Ridge Road. It is the single point of access into both those schools. As those schools were being built, we knew that we were able to identify some additional funds that we had borrowed and set those aside in a project ordinance, and has been identified for some years to help us pay for an extension of that road. We've been working on a joint agreement with NCDOT and the town of Harrisburg to do that, and I've provided a memo to you that outlines that agreement. We finally have reached a point that we have, there have been a number of steps in between, but the primary delay has been identifying all funding. Division 10 actually had identified some local funding that was lost with some of the budget adoption, but they have re-identified that. So there will be $375,000 that will come from Division 10 and from statewide funds. The remainder of those funds would then come from Cabarrus County, which is approximately was identified in this agreement as $825,000. So should you adopt this draft agreement and allow the county manager and county attorney to move forward with the final adoption or final approval of that, then anything above that $825,000 would have to come back to the board. Two other items. I've asked also for your permission to request voluntary, or to have the board request voluntary annexation of these parcels into the town of Harrisburg. And both of them are already within their extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction. That would allow the town, once this road is constructed, while the bridge and road were being constructed, they would be under DOT maintenance. But once they're finished, DOT would turn those over to the town of Harrisburg for perpetual maintenance. That's the bridge and the road. In order to do that, they would need to be in their city limits, so they could then apply Powellville funds. That would also help them with a portion of the project that's their responsibility, which would be some landscaping and sidewalks that are necessary to complete this. Some of the other pieces of this, we own the majority of the property. As you get to Stallings Road, where this will connect, where we'll be required to build, the bridge will extend, there'll be some segment of road, and we'll be putting in some turn lanes. And we will have to acquire right-of-way there. That will be the county's responsibility. We have spoken to the property owner, but because there was no formal agreement, have not moved forward with formal negotiations. Should you choose to move forward with this, we will begin those formal negotiations and actually be bringing a proposal back to you for what the purchase price of that right-of-way will be. So that's an item that would come back to you that we would, because it's an unknown at this point what that negotiation will entail. So I guess what I'm asking for at this point is really that we'll be asking that you make a motion to authorize the submission of the petition for voluntary annexation and motion to approve the draft agreement with NCDOT that outlines this project. DOT will actually be putting the project, helping with final design. We'd hired WK Dixon to do some environmental and road design. DOT's bridge design unit will be completing the design on the bridge. It'll be, because it's very similar in construction to the bridge they recently replaced on Hickory Ridge Road. They'll also then be putting it out to bid and doing all construction oversight, testing, everything entailed with the construction itself rather than the county, since we don't have experience doing that.
Okay. Comments or questions? Chris?
I know we've talked about this for probably more than a year, I would assume.
Yes, sir.
The 800,000, that would be our portion. Is that in our budget, or has it been budgeted for?
It's in the school construction fund and has been sitting there for
Okay.
4 or 5 years, and
Right.
it's what's holding up the closing of that fund.
Okay. Is that number it was higher, wasn't it?
It was. It
thought
helps the DOT has agreed to design that bridge. That reduced our cost. And then we've seen some unit pricing come down. They're fairly confident. You're probably aware, if you've driven it all around the town of Harrisburg, and you do, The bridge in Hickory Ridge just above the school was replaced. Back Creek, just below the school at Fuda Creek, was replaced. The next bridge to be replaced, I believe, will be Back Creek and Farm Mill Road. After that, then Stallings Road in Back Creek. You've got the double tracking project and the bridge work being done there. So it is a very good bid environment because there is so much work going on in that area, and it's avoiding some of the mobilization cost.
Okay. With the purchase of the property in that area for the right-of-way, or purchase of the right-of-way, is there funds in?
We have funds for both.
That's,
yes.
oh, okay, great. Okay.
Okay. Steve? Larry? Jason?
The only thing that I would say is this is a significant amount of money, and Commissioner Poole, you and I this week talked about some alternative plans, and I would at least like to take a look at what our plans are in terms of the bond and in terms of everything else. And we've waited quite a while on this. I would like to maybe table this motion through our December meeting, and then take a look and see what our priorities are in terms of spending and things like that. We could do a lot with $800,000, and I'm not sure that this is our number one priority with respect to that money.
That's true. However, I believe that what you said, because we've been doing this since the high school was built, this is part of the money used to build that high school.
This is certificates of participation for 2009, and it's going to either be used for this project or it's going to be returned to the general fund for debt service. It cannot be used for anything else.
Yeah, this can't be used for anything else. The good thing about it is it's taken a long time to partner to make sure our cost was reduced.
And this was initially part of the construction of the middle school,
That's right.
but it's just taken forever.
Well, there were a lot of environmental issues of, could we even put a bridge over there? Could it connect in? What was going to happen with the other construction in the area? I mean, there are a number of things that have fed into making this take as long as it has. There was an incident today at Hickory Ridge, 7 o'clock this morning. They were all out in the football stadium for about an hour while the building was searched. If anything happens at these two schools, they have one way out. Whether it is in the event of an emergency or whether it is for any activities going on there. I think this is something that that we should move forward with. The funds are there, so it's not like we can't use it for another project, as you mentioned. It's going to go out there, or it's going to go towards debt service. And I know this has been a priority from the school system when the high school was built. It just, they didn't have funds at that time to move forward with it, and there were a lot of questions that needed to be answered. So, I mean, I would support us going forward with this.
It is needed, and isn't that bridge needed out there to get access to in and out of that school?
There's only one way in and one way out, and when each of those bridges have been replaced, then there really was only one way out.
And I do appreciate you reminding me, we've been working with Blake Kiger, who's of course on the school board and one of their property representatives, but we also, David Burnett with the school system, set up a meeting with the middle school principal and the high school principal, school construction staff, Town of Harrisburg, NCDOT, and myself, and it is very much supported by those two principals because there is that single point of access, and with two schools like that, it's a tremendous amount of traffic.
I don't know why there have been 3 incidences in the last month at 3 different high schools in this county where the buildings have had to be evacuated. We have not seen that activity for a number of years. I don't know why all of a sudden we've had 3 incidences. One today, one last week, and the one at A.L. Brown was a few weeks ago. So I think there are a number of reasons why this particular project makes sense to give more access points in that whole area. So that's my comment on that of moving forward. So any other comments about it? Okay. 4.15, which is on page 3, or the front side of the second page, discussion concerning emergency hydrants for Northeast Volunteer Fire Department.
This actually was a discussion item, and Bobby and Steve are welcome to come up here. I think that between Mr. Downs and I, we can also discuss it. When we met with the Northeast Volunteer Fire Department to discuss discuss both the contract and some other issues ongoing out there. One of the things they raised was the need to have some points that they can fill their tankers. Of course, Concord and Kannapolis have reached agreement with the city of Albemarle and begun construction of the water line along 49 that'll pass right by this fire department. So we had approached the city of Concord as the lead on the engineering for that project about the possibility of having a hydrant that would allow connection to that. They have made a proposal or have come back to us with a proposal for that. For what each hydrant would require. It does, by their request, include a digital meter, a locking device on the hydrant, a backflow device, and a fencing with a locked gate. And then we would be responsible for any additional property that might be needed. I will say at the volunteer fire department itself, the parcel just in front of it, between it and 49, it appears that entire right-of-way has been purchased. So that would be a good location that I believe you could actually put it within the right-of-way and not obstruct either the water line construction or the future widening of 49. That total cost is approximately $20,000 per hydrant. So there's two issues we would raise, and then one is, first of all, how you would, what direction you'd like to give us on this, whether we continue to pursue this. And then, as you know, there may be some equity issues later with some of the other volunteer fire departments. A number of them have used the dry hydrant method to have these same fill points, which helps them address some of their insurance ratings. And that, of course, is finding a fill point at at some kind of a water impoundment pond, or with the case of Odell, actually, our Lake Howell. I don't know if you guys wanted to add something to that.
And in the fire service, when you got a water line coming through the district, first thing you think of is hydrants. And, Northeast is one of our departments that has the least tax base. Trying to work with them to be able to lower their rating, the hydrant would be a great benefit. There are other options like Mr. Marshall just stated, looking at ponds. And the problem is just trying to locate those ponds, make sure the ponds meet the state's requirement for a certain amount of gallons that the pond has to have, as well as securing agreements with the property owners to be able to put in a hydrant at those locations. So it's something that definitely would benefit the department and eventually benefit the citizens with lowering the rating for the district. But it is very expensive.
Yeah, I think that their president of their board also brought up some of their ponds are not actually very accessible either. The biggest thing is you've got a large water line coming through there. Again, they're in the far northeast part of the county, mostly rural areas. We got 3 locations identified, and that would be at Lynn's Harness Shop, Gold Hill Road East, and St. Stephen's or Old Buffalo, one of those 3. Whatever you choose, if you want to do it, if you want us to pursue this, that's great. One or all 3 locations. I know they would prefer all 3, but I know at least one right across the street from the fire department would probably be their optimal location. Talking with the city, their biggest concerns, it's a large water line coming through there. It's in a rural area. If you start putting hydrants on it with security, and that's why they're asking for these extra measures of security and safety there, so that you can't breach the line, use water out of it without paying, but the biggest one is a major transmission line of water, of clean water. I think it's already gone through their center in Stanley? I'm not quite sure if they've been through the processing plant, but that's their biggest concern. They didn't want they wanted to make sure that they felt secure enough with these hydrants being out there that they weren't going to be tampered with or and that type of thing.
Well, I think that especially 2 things. One, while the line's going in, if we're going to do something, this would be the time to do it. I think a regular fire hydrant, it's been a few years ago, about $5,000. So this is obviously more expensive because of the security measures on there. However, even within the city limits, I've seen people with a wrench back up to a hydrant and fill up. Most of them have permits, I hope. A couple of them I've called in on and just asked, because it looked a little odd that they were pulling money out. I mean, not money out, sorry, pulling water out. Well, that is money, but, so, I mean, I think the security thing makes sense. 1, 2, or 3. I would say 1 for sure. I don't know about 2 and 3, unless it helps the ISO rating. If you can, that's usually what we've looked at. If it helps the property owners in that area because the hydrants are there, then I'd like that specific. Well, I know you can't give us specifics because it's after the fact. You have to put them in first, and then they come back and evaluate and let us know if it actually is going to save anybody any money. But that's something that I know whenever we talk about the volunteer fire departments, how it's going to help the property owners in the area. So that would be my question on it. So
They would, specifically be using these hydrants for a water shuttle operation. So, really looking at about 2 miles apart for the hydrants would be best. The departments there's a formula, but basically they're graded on a time of being able to connect to that hydrant, fill and dump water. So to a degree, some of the security measures also create an issue just with that process. I had talked with OSFM, and they stated that they have done some of these drills with the lockable caps that are put on hydrants, and it really doesn't affect the time. Some of the other measures, putting a fence around it, they say they've never really dealt with that, so I'm not really sure. But, 1 hydrant is going to be beneficial. 2 hydrants is going to be great for their district.
Chris, thoughts on how do you think we should proceed?
The 1 hydrant is fine with me.
Does this address their sprinkler system issue at the fire department down there they've talked about in the past?
No, it does not.
It does not.
Because there would be an added cost of running the line underneath the road to the station.
Right.
Then this system provides a high volume of water but no pressure. So then there would be pressure issues for the sprinkler system.
Okay.
So the department would still be looking at a possible expense of either an elevated tank or some type of fire pump to boost pressure to provide pressure needed for the sprinkler system.
I see. Well, I think
the city didn't agree to do that either. They only agreed to the hydrants.
The hydrants.
And like Steve said, that there's variable pressure at different times of the day, and what's happening, that those trucks that are backing up to are applying the pressure, they're actually pumping the water out of it versus the water line pushing the water into the trucks. So,
right.
So
I'm definitely in favor of going ahead, so sort of not likely to have that opportunity again. 1 might be a little, I may lean towards more than 1, considering the distance. I'd really want to hear input from you guys and from the fire department on that. You said 1's okay, 2's great.
Yeah, because you're looking at your distance. When you look at Northeast Fire District, your main road running through there is 49. So you start looking at 49 and where you can put hydrants, and then start looking at a distance. And we actually have a map that shows 2-mile rings around some proposed hydrant sites, and kind of gives you an idea of, what area can be covered with those hydrants.
Mm-hmm. And what does that show? What's your conclusion?
Well, need to sit down and look more at the elevation. Because this line is volume and not really pressure, some of the pressure will come from the change in elevation.
Right.
So that still hasn't been fully evaluated. Was going to get with the city to look at how that changes the pressure in the change of elevation to determine, if there's some better locations to put that hydrant. As far as coverage, I think the department will be able to achieve a lower rating with at least 2 hydrants. I think that it will provide, that would provide them pretty good coverage. Again, they
think-
would love to see it all the way down 49 at
Yeah.
every intersection, but.
One might not
Well,
do the trick
I
to
think
lower the
if they're
rating.
not able to find other water sources,
Right,
then it could hinder not being able to get that full rating.
right.
You know, it's just going to depend on what other water sources they have.
Right. For that reason, I would be in favor of 2 or more, if that helps with the rating.
Larry?
I'd be in favor of doing all 3 of them.
Okay. Jason?
I'd probably go with Commissioner Morris and go with 2. I mean, it sounds like the people that are in charge think 2 would be sufficient, so I would like to be sure that that these would fit within the existing right-of-way, though, because I would be hesitant. I mean, I would be concerned about pursuing more than one, and then we have a significant cost in addition to the increased cost that we have for the fire hydrant above what an average hydrant costs. We've got more extensive, particularly if it's on road frontage and things like that, it could be expensive. So I would like to be sure that we can fit those within the existing right-of-way, and then I would say 2.
Okay, right now we have it under consent, so I think at this point I would suggest that we put it under new business and you get some more information for us, try to get us some maps to show the 2 and the 3. I'd go with 2, 3 if you can prove that the third one is really going to make a difference. If 2 makes enough of a difference, then I would look at that and I would ask, I don't know what the locking device looks like. Is it, you know, if it's a padlock that everybody and their brother can get a key to, that's one thing. If it's a specific device that's got a very unique key that only certain people would be able to access it, then maybe the fence with the locked gate isn't necessarily needed. So could you do some more conversations with the cities plural, any, whichever entities, whether it's Concord or Kannapolis? And, you know, kind of make sure that we're not doing overkill on security, which then could backfire on us when somebody really when they do need to get access to it. And just make sure that that $20,000 per hydrant is the right way to go. So if we put that under new business, we can get more information from them, and then we can give them more direction in 2 weeks. So just a little bit more information I think would be helpful.
Sounds good.
Okay. 4.16, transfer of utility easement at Patriots Elementary School.
With Patriots Elementary, we are actually with the city and the county and the school district acquired the property for Patriots Elementary. There was a agreement. Keep missing my microphone. There was an agreement to provide a sewer right-of-way for the adjoining development. It's necessary to get to the main sewer outfall. As they've gone through the development, they discovered they needed to relocate that, and so NVR Ryan Homes has needed to purchase a right-of-way. That amount is $3,188. It has been your standard practice to, if you approve that sale, to also adopt a budget amendment that applies that money to that particular school.
Can you, Pam, maybe, when, for example, I mean, this is not a large amount of money, but when that's applied to Patriot, what type of things can they spend that money on?
I have no idea.
Okay,
I'd have to go back and see whether they directly give it to the school.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking is, I've never questioned it before. I do think that if it's done at the school, I think that's a good use of putting it back at that school. I would like to know what their options would be, primarily because of the previous issue that we talked about, which was the turf field. That had nothing to do with Central Cabarrus. That was at Carl Furr.
Mm-hmm.
So if we say you're using the money for this school, it should be used at that school.
I can get Kelly to tell me from the previous ones that we gave back.
Okay. That would, I mean, I don't
what
think there's
kind of
ever,
restrictions
I
were.
don't remember ever a time in 15 years where money's been used for a purpose like this and then transferred to another school. But I'm not real certain what they can use it for, so that would be my only question on it. Chris? Steve? Larry? Jason? Okay. Okay. Now, Commissioners, if you will look at the regular agenda, it'll be the last 3 pages. We do need to make a few notes. On the very last page that you have, front side of the last page that you have in your handout, under consent, item number 1, we're going to move to December. Item number 10, we're going to move to December. Item number 2, the artificial turf project, wait a minute. Before I say that, under new business, 1, 2, and 3 are going to November 15th. So, under consent, item number 2 under consent, which is the artificial turf project at Central Cabarrus High School, I would like to recommend that that becomes number 1 under new business. Item number 5, which is the emergency hydrants for Northeast Volunteer Fire Department, I recommend becomes number 2 under new business. Item number 10, I think I said already, but I want to make sure, and item 10 will also go to December. Are there any other items under consent besides 1, 2, 5, and 10 that anyone would like moved under new business?
What about number 12, the library?
Number 12, sorry. Number 12 then would become item number 3. I thought I was doing such a good job, too. Okay, so consent would include, we would renumber it so that sales tax for the Northwest Gym parking lot would be number 1, then 4 would become number 2, on down. New business, item number 1 would be the turf field. Item number 2 would be the emergency hydrants. Item number 3 would be the Midland Library concept. 4 would still be the financial report. 5, still where it should be. 6, also those wouldn't change. Does that make sense, or do I need to repeat?
Makes sense.
Everybody's got that? Megan, do you have that? Okay. If that's is okay, I would accept a motion that we approve the agenda for our regular meeting with those changes. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, Commissioners, we do have need for a closed session tonight. So this time, I would accept a motion that we go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A3 and 5. And we would invite Jonathan Marshall to join us.
I have one comment to make before we adjourn.
Okay.
And that comment is with respect to Channel 22. I did meet with David Baxter, and I know how many people like to watch that. You can get a free, it's not a set-top box, it's just a free converter from the cable company. I got a letter about it. But also, if you have any sort of a new TV that gets at least 100 channels, Channel 22 is available on Channel 97.2 on your television, and you can watch us for free on that without the converter, 97.2. And you may have to do an auto search on your television so that it finds Channel 97.2, but it is there. I've watched it on Channel 97.2, so I'll say that again at our regular meeting so people will know, but people have asked me about that.
That's
You do
good.
have to have cable.
Yeah, you do have to have cable. And if we can get something on the website would be good, so that people go looking for it, so. Okay, we do, I do need a motion for us to go into closed session.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. And I will remind everybody that when we come out of closed session, we will be recessing to Friday, November 15th at 2 p.m. in the Commissioner's Chamber, so that anybody watching this telecast will know what we're going to do when we come out of closed session. So, okay, thank you all very much, and we'll go down the hallway.